call this meeting to order of the Lincoln County Board of Education in regular session at the county office. The meeting's being live streamed, and a video copy will be available within 5 working days. With that, I'll ask Ms. McComas to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll note that Ms. Burns, myself, and Ms. McComas are present. Mr. Mosteller is joining us on the phone. Can you hear us, Mr. Mosteller? Robert, are you with us? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
And Mr. Wilson is absent tonight. Next item is public comment. Anyone signed in? No? With that, we'll move on to item 4. I'll turn that over to Mr. Barnell.
Good evening. Item 4 under instruction and leadership, we're going to have Mr. Miller, the Special Education Director, give us some training tonight and some information on House Bill 2499 and Senate Bill 199. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Matthew Miller, Special Ed Director.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you. We've had 2 new, House Bill 2499 and Senate Bill 199 taking effect for our school systems. House Bill 2499 starts on July 1, and Senate Bill 199 will start on July 2nd. So I have to do a training. I have to train folks like the members of the Board of Education, our superintendent, assistant superintendent, principals, and then they forward that on to teachers. So for any board member that's not present tonight, there is a live stream of this. You can go back and watch it, and if you have any questions, you can reach back out to me for anything. I'm going to send around a real quick sign-in sheet. The folks that are here can sign that. That way we have documentation of our training. But before we get into that, I'd like to share something briefly with you guys. I'll pass this around real quick, and I'll share with you what it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was kind of some exciting news for the special ed department. Basically, every year, the West Virginia Department of Ed, they have to do what's called an annual LEA determination, and basically they determine whether each LEA meets, needs assistance, needs intervention, or needs substantial intervention to meet what's in the requirements or to stay compliant with IDEA. And I'm going to go over that a little bit with you in a few minutes. There's a little description there of a little bit about what it covers. At the bottom, some of the topics. What we do is every year we get a report, and it's called the ADA audit report. And it looks at everything from graduation rate, dropout, suspensions, preschool, parent involvement, transitions, and so forth. If you flip over on the back of that handout, about halfway down, it says, as a result of the review, the West Virginia Department of Ed has determined the Lincoln County Schools meets the requirements related to the implementation of IDEA and has been assigned a determination of meets the requirements. So I just wanted to share that with you guys to let you know that we do have some good things going on in the special education department. We are in compliance with our IDEA, and I'd just like to thank my staff for helping out and making that possible. But not only just the staff, it also goes out to all the teachers that they work with, the principals for helping out and making sure these happen. The special ed department it has a lot of components to it, I guess to say, and in order to meet those requirements. It's not just one person doing everything. It's a group of people that come together or work together to make this happen. So I'd just like to let you guys know that we're making progress in a good way. So you're welcome. Now we'll get started with House Bill 2499, and basically what that is basically looking at IDEA, what it is. Everybody be familiar with what that is, and also what Policy 2419 is. And personnel trained in person, the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, principals, assistant principals, any appropriate staff that work with our special needs students, county board members, and any teachers. Basically, what we're going to talk about today is just the IEP format. We're going to talk about IDEA, or the Individual with Disability Act. It's a federal regulation, and we're also going to I'm going to share with you a little bit about Policy 2419, which is regulations for education of students with exceptionalities. This training, and folks need to know about, any newly employed personnel and elected or appointed county board members must receive training within 30 days. So this went into effect, so you guys are now being trained on it. A little introduction. What is IDEA? You may have heard of that. It's been around for a very long time. They revamped it in 2004. It's a federal law ensuring that eligible students with disabilities receive a free and appropriate education. And the purpose of that is to ensure that special education and related services are available to meet those unique needs and prepare students for further education, employment, or independent living. What's important, so some key principles of IDEA that we need to know about. Then you'll see as we go through this that there's a little overlap between IDEA and Policy 2419. Key principles start with, it's a free and appropriate education. Basically, it's educational services provided publicly and without charge, meeting state standards and the student's unique needs as outlined in their IEP. And we'll talk a little bit about what an IEP is. Second thing is the appropriate evaluation. We look at determined eligibility and educational needs. Our department's on an 80-day timeline when we start this process, that we have to have everything completed within that 80-day timeline. That is one of the things that we are looked at by the state, and that was part of our determination letter that we were outstanding on. So our evaluation is just a comprehensive and a non-discriminatory evaluation. It's requiring parental consent is necessary before special ed services begin to determine eligibility and the needs for that student. When we do evaluations, we look at two. We do an initial evaluation that's to identify the needs of the student, and the second one is a reeval once the student becomes eligible. The next thing listed is the individualized education program, or basically we know what's an IEP. And basically a good way of looking at what an IEP is, it's a roadmap for students' education. It's a written plan. It's developed by a team that includes the parent, the teacher, the specialist, and details that the student's educational program, goals, services, and progress measurement. All these are components of that IEP. Something we also got to take into consideration is the least restrictive environment. And sometimes you'll see that and it'll just be listed as LRE. It's educating students with disabilities along their non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriately. And that would be students with disabilities should be educated with the non-disabled peers as much as possible, with placement outside the general classroom justified by the student's need. Special education is considered a service, not a place. A lot of people think it's a place. Once they get there, they stay there forever. I like to tell folks that they think of it as a destination. It's not a destination. Hey, I've arrived, I'm here, I don't move any further. But That's not the goal. It's not a place, and we provide a service, hopefully move folks along and get them back on track with everybody else. The next key principle that's important is parent and student participation. Parents have the right to be involved in all educational decisions and must give consent for evaluations and services. Students should be involved in the IEP process when appropriate. And that happens when students become age 14. Usually it's in 8th grade. And we have to do what's called transition services, and that's part of Policy 2419. And the transition services is kind of set forth as where the student's at, what do they want to do down the road, and then we try to work towards providing some training and education in that area to help that student be successful. Number 6 there is procedural safeguards, and that's just protecting the rights of the parents. Basically, it's protecting the right of the parents and the students, including a prior written notice, access to records, independent evaluations, dispute resolution, or ensuring communication is in an understandable language. Sometimes when you have meetings, people want to just throw out all the acronyms for certain things, and you lose people. And I ask folks not to do that. Make sure that we do talk to people so they understand everything that's going on and encourage them to ask questions if they are not. Under IED, we have Part B, ages 3 through 21. The focus there is just for special education and related services for school-age children. And related services are services that they may need that's outside of the classroom, such as they may need occupational therapy, speech therapy, or physical therapy, or counseling, and those are provided as related services.
Is there any questions up to this point?
Yes. Does anybody have any questions? Have I lost anybody?
Still with
Okay.
you.
All right. When we're looking at students and we evaluate them, we also look through the eligibility category. There's 13, and I gave you some examples here of the 13. SLD, those are our students that are with a severe learning disability. AU is our autism students. ED, those are our behavior disorder. OHI, other health impairment. VI for vision services, and HH for hard of hearing. There's other categories like DD for developmental delayed for the little folks. But there's 13 of those categories that are eligible categories that students could qualify for. Something we are monitored on the next thing is what's called Child Find, and that's our school district responsibility to identify, locate, and evaluate students with disabilities. Once a year, we have to publish a letter and reach out to families and identify students that may need some assistance or services from us through the school system, such as vision or hearing, as examples. We do those every fall, and we also screen kids for like speech and things in the spring as well.
Now, your parents and your educators, your teachers can both make referrals to
Yes.
the principal and the special ed.
Yes. The IEP process, we have to have an IEP team, and like I said, it's composed of the parents, the teacher, LEA representatives. If the student needs related services, then that person will be invited there. There may be outside agencies that work with the student. They can be invited to the IEP meeting and be part of it. The IEP content, first part of that is we have to have a meeting notice, signature page, present levels where the student's at, what are their strengths and their weaknesses, goals set forth for, where's the student at and where do we want them to be. Accommodations, and accommodations are things like they may need extended time, they might need a calculator, it could be, a reading device for assistive technology. It could be something in there that would accommodate it. If the student's having trouble visually, we might give them large print, as an example. Our prior written notice, that's important. With our prior written notice, we have to document what we're doing, such as if we're doing a change of placement, we have to say why we're doing a change of placement, why the LEA accepted that or rejected it, and then you document that on it so everybody knows what happened during that meeting. Transition planning, that's at age 14. That's when it starts, and it goes all the way up to age 21. Since I mentioned transition planning, I just say we were recognized this year for making a huge shift from where we were at a couple years ago. My compliance manager, Shannon Watts, she monitors the high school. So we actually had 100% compliance in our transition needs this year. So my hat's off to her for helping out. Next thing that's important to remember is our annual review, and annual reviews are done yearly. So if the IEP, if you had the IEP date, say, April the 30th, then the following year you want to do that prior to April the 30th, and then it would take effect when the other IEP, the existing IEP, goes out, then the new one would take place. West Virginia Code makes a provision that any teacher, service provider who disagrees with an IEP, and that could, it could be anybody sitting on the team at that point. With the IEP, shall file a written explanation with the district's special ed director, outlined with the disagreement. And basically, they would just state reasons why they disagreed, send it to me, and then we would start the process of looking into that. The other thing that's important with our IEP process is our seniors in high school. Every year before they graduate, we have to do what's called an exit meeting. And that's just to review the summary of performance, where the student was at, where he's at that current time. You have to put that in place. Usually it's 9 weeks before or 45 days or 9 weeks before the school year ends, but no later than 7 days prior to graduation. We're reaching the end of that school year for a student that would be turning 21 years old. And at that point, when you do the senior exit meetings, you may invite folks in, like Division of Rehabilitation Services. They provide help to our students. And they're a very valuable asset, actually, to a lot of our kids, because they sometimes will appropriate certain monies to get for students that if they need help looking for a job, they may help them with transportation issues, back and forth for a period of time, or if they need work boots or clothes or something like that, those folks are really good to help out. Our LRE, which is our least restrictive environment, is defined as educating students with their disabilities with their non-disabled peers to the maximum extent appropriate. We have to take these into consideration when we place students based on their ability. What's best for them, with their LRE. Do they need to be in the classroom and we provide support to them? Or would they be better served in a resource class or a self-contained class? So there's a variety of different areas for our environment where we can educate students, and depending on what their needs are is where we would place them. And our continuum of placement, like I said, it ranges from a regular class to specialized programs. Other things that are important that we need to think about when we're dealing with IDEA is supplementary aids and services. We need to do that to help our kids be successful. Examples of some of those would be to be educated in the general classroom is to provide a supervisory aid, do accommodations. Like I said earlier, like our accommodations would be, some extended time or a calculator, or modifications to an assignment. And that may be something like if you're given a test and it has multiple choice and there's 4 answers, you take one of the answers away, you'd be modifying that assignment, and the student would have 3 answers to choose from instead of 4.
Now, before we go on, Mr. Miller, I'd like to request that you put a blank IEP, and maybe one with everything redacted, names and things redacted, so board members have an opportunity to see what it looks like.
Okay.
See what those look like, along with all the documentation that goes with it. We'll just send that out in the form of an email so they can peruse that, and that'll give them an idea of what that actual process looks like based on this training.
Okay. We can do that. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I can either come back and talk to you. I'm flexible. whatever we need to do. So, next thing there is, we hear IDEA, and then you also hear people talk about Section 504. So IDEA is, it's offered special education and related services, and we outline those in an IEP. Now, when we're talking about a 504 plan is basically providing accommodations and modifications to the student. And basically what you're trying to do is remove barriers that would be in the way of the student being successful, and it has to do with medical needs. So, for example, Johnny breaks his foot, he can't get up and down the stairs. So you would do a 504, and he would be allowed to use the elevator. Example, for that. Anxiety, we get a lot of those from the doctor. Irritable bowel syndrome, and sometimes that's associated with anxiety. But if a kid needs to go to the restroom more frequently than others, we just put that in place, and basically that's based on what the doctor's orders would send to us. IDEA provides funding for special education under Section 504. We don't get any, and it's not governed so much by the special education department. It is governed or looked over by what's called our civil rights enforcement. So there's a difference between the two, but they both would apply to our students and making sure that we meet their needs and for their education.
And just for the record, a staff member can actually receive a 504 as well, an adult.
Yes. Yeah. And we've had that happen. Policy 2419, that's basically what governs my office back there. Everything we do is based on Policy 2419. It regulates our education of students with exceptionalities. Majority of that is pulled from IDEA because a lot of this overlaps. And basically what it is, it outlines West Virginia regulations for educating students with exceptionalities, including students with disabilities, and our gifted students also fall under this category. And the purpose of that is to provide a free education to any eligible student. And that can be anybody from preschool through adult, so anything from our 3-year-olds to 21-year-old. Policy 2419 follows the requirements of IDEA from 2004. Our local educational agencies must implement these policies to receive federal funds under IDEA. So if we're not following what they ask, we get no funding. What's covered in Policy 2419? Students with disabilities. Eligible is based on those 13 disability categories I mentioned earlier under IDEA, requiring a need for special education and related services. Our gifted and exceptional gifted students fall under this category as well. Your gifted students are typically your students from grades 1 through 8. In 9th grade, we look at the student, and instead of they're considered gifted, they are now considered exceptionally gifted for 9 through 12 students. Age range under Policy 2419, it applies to, like I said, anybody from preschool through adulthood, from 3 years old to 21. The core principles of 2419 are very similar to IDEA. They provide a free education. Something we get monitored on is our child find. Our school districts to identify, locate, and evaluate students with disabilities. That includes our gifted or exceptional gifted students. Our evaluation and eligibility determine eligible students based on a multidisciplinary evaluation, and basically this falls under what we consider our multi-tiered systems of support. Otherwise, you may have heard of that as our SAT process. So we identify a lot of our students through it based on the policy. A good thing about with the SAT process is students could be in it for a while before we determine whether they meet those requirements for additional help towards an IEP, and then we would evaluate for that. If that happens, then we have our IEP, and that's developed, and it's an individualized plan for students with disabilities. And key aspects of our eligibility are determined. So basically what happens is when we look at the students and we test them, they use what's called a three-prong test. Eligible for special education in West Virginia requires the student to have a designated exceptionality, and it has to be one of those 13 that we talked about. They look at the three prongs. Does the student have a disability that meets eligibility requirements, such as a learning disability, autism disorder, has speech or language impairment? Prong 2, does the disability adversely affect the student's educational performance? Does it impact their ability to learn and participate in the general education classroom? And 3, does the student need special education and related services to address their needs? All 3 must be met for the student to be eligible for special education and related services. And that's listed in IDEA, and that's part of Policy 2419. So we have to follow those 3 before folks are identified. Continuing with that, some of the stuff you've seen earlier are least restrictive environment, where we're educating our students. Our parent and student participation, our procedural safeguards, protecting the rights of parents and the student, including the rights to dispute. If they see something they're not happy with, they have a right to do that. Discipline, in accordance with our federal law, students with disabilities must be provided procedural safeguards and the due process rights and procedures in accordance with IDEA 2004 and our West Virginia Policy 2419. The LEA must consider any unique circumstances on a case-by-case basis when determining whether a change of placement is appropriate for a student with a disability. So you have to look and see, is discipline part of their eligibility? So an in-school suspension is not considered a day of suspension, so if we're dealing with discipline. A disciplinary change of placement is a removal for students' current educational placement for more than 10 consecutive days, or a series of removals that constitute a pattern. Disciplinary action review forms, and you may hear this word DARF, any day after day 10 in the same school year, the LEA must provide services to the student. Basically, our goal is we're monitored with discipline, and we have students that can be suspended up to 10 days. At 10 days, we have to do what's called a manifestation to determine whether their disability is causing their behavior.
Now,
And if-
Matthew, is that 10 days per year or 10 days at one time
10
only and you can do it again?
10 days per year.
Okay.
Yep. So we have to ask the 2 questions when we're dealing with students with discipline. Ask if the conduct in question was caused by or had a direct substantial relationship to the student's disability. And the second one is if the conduct in question was a direct result of the LEA's failure to implement the IEP. So did the school not implement the IEP? If either A or B is met, then the team determines it is a manifestation of the student's disability. At that point, what we have to do, if their disability is part of, reasons why they got in trouble or discipline-wise, is we have to go back and we have to look at the behavior intervention plan that's in place, and we have to work on it, improve it, make it better. We also look at doing what's called an FBA, or a functional behavior assessment. We have one of our psychologists will do that. At that time, that student can be returned back to the classroom,
Regular classroom or special ed classroom?
either one.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever's in their schedule.
Yeah, whatever the schedule is.
Okay.
Yeah. So they would just go back to the classroom if it's a manifestation. And at that time, see, we're revamping the behavior plan. You also look at maybe having to do a functional behavior assessment for that. Looking at general education classes with students with disabilities, we look at what's called a 70-30 split. And basically, that means that you can have 30% guidelines, but no more than 30% of students in a general class should have an IEP. If it's a co-taught class, you got 2 teachers in a co-taught class, you can have a slightly higher percentage, up to 50% of those students with an IEP.
You have to have a certified special ed person in there, though, don't
Yes.
you, with a regular teacher?
Yes, and with a co-teacher, you have to have a certified special ed teacher.
How many co-taught classes do we have? Anyone know that? Off the
I-
top of your head?
I don't know it off the top of my head.
General rule of thumb, 2 to 3 a building,
Yeah,
2 or 3 a building?
per building.
per
Okay.
building. Yeah. And then unless you're at the high school, there's usually, with
few
with the,
more.
yeah, with a few more because of the math and the English.
And the number of students.
And the
there.
number of students, yeah, are higher than they are with the others. Special education classes and resource. There's different levels for our students, and this is something we have to take into account when we're looking at staffing needs. Is your level 1, typically like your resource room settings for K-5, we can have 8 students. And your level 1s are just your students that you just be working with, maybe one-on-one. They don't need to be supervised. They're not a danger to themselves. Your level 2s and level 3 are special ed classes for students. Those are more intense managed needs. And you may have a maximum of 6 students, but you have to have 2 staff members.
That would be a teacher and an aide?
Be a teacher and an aide, yeah. Unless it's your level 3 and the younger kids, and it could be a 1-to-4 ratio. So, classes for students with multiple disabilities in a resource room should not exceed 12 students. Those are your typical middle high school classrooms. The state had put into effect last year, if you have 12 students in such as a resource classroom, they do allow you to do a waiver, and you may increase that classroom size up to 15 students, so you can go 3 over. And
But you have to have that waiver already approved and
You have to
back
have-
in the county.
yeah, you have to have that waiver approved by the state. And basically what it is once we realize that we have, let's say we have a class that has 12, and then all of a sudden we have, another kid moves in, now we're at 13. So we're over. So the principal usually lets me know if we don't see it right off, is we go talk with the special ed teacher, and we offer them overage pay, and that's part of the waivers. We have to get an okay from them. Then we submit that to the state. They usually get back with us within a couple weeks, and that gives us to look at whether do we need to move. Is there a way we can maybe move that student to another classroom, or not? And if not, within 2 weeks, then we pay an overage for that student.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, if they come from another county, what is that, ours or another county, what is their responsibility when a student who has special needs transfers to another county or another school? How many days do we let them have before, but it has to be here by how many days?
Yeah, usually we try to reach out, contact. We have 10 days.
10 days.
Yeah, 10 days to get everything in place. And usually what we do is they would send us their information or their IEP. We try to get that ahead of time. And we place that student in appropriate classes that would match up with what they
What
the services they're receiving. And that gives us 10 days to send out, because with an IEP, you have to do day notice to the parents and get them in. And then that gives us that time to
Do
rewrite the
anything you need to
IEP.
do.
Whatever services
Yes.
you can provide.
Yeah, so we
But
gotta
you have to
have-
do everything within 10 days, you can't
Yes.
just let it go on
No,
and on.
no, you can't let it go.
Well, that's good.
It's a little more, it's not as cumbersome as it used to be because the IEPs are now online.
Yes,
So you have access to it instantly.
As
Instantly.
soon as you enroll them,
Yeah.
you have access to their IEP.
Yeah, you just gotta be sure you put it in there, from where they're coming to where they're going.
yeah.
And I guess most counties in West Virginia are very, very good about doing that, to get them, to the right, wherever they go.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't know, though, You know, they don't know where they really went until you get the
That's what monitor.
request for information for their records, do you?
Right.
Yeah, that would be a
Right.
hard thing.
Yeah, and sometimes what could be an issue is we've had a kid that was in this county, that jumped to this county and was there for 30 days and
And
just got
moved
the
on.
paperwork, and then they come to us. So we're backtracking. But no, you know, I give my office staff credit back there that they are on top of it.
Yeah.
And that, you know, we get everything done within that timeline, and things in place. So I brag on them often. Here's just some numbers that this come directly from policy 2419. Maximum number of students, based on the level of need. For example, you know, level 1 services, the number of students with the ratio of 1 to 6. That's why sometimes you may see that we have a request for an additional teacher. You know, for that, or grades 3 through 5, we get that ratio of 1 to 8. You know, if it's a level 2, it drops down. If it's a level 3, you know, that ratio is even lower than that. It's 1 to 4. Teachers' rights to an advocate. This is another thing that's part of this 2499 House bill. Teachers' rights for advocating for students, procedural rights documented and protections under our West Virginia Code 1820-1. So classroom teachers our rights are protected, and basically what it is if they advocate for that student's needs, then the principal can't reprimand them for being an advocate for that student. And that's something, you know, that's new. The last thing here is just our principals and county board members, you know, need to be informed. We must inform our teachers in person, you know, of the rights. Basic documentation process within 45 days. So our grading periods are set up for every 45 days. So we have, you know, teachers and kids are struggling or passing. So they have to make sure that they are documenting, you know, reasons why, contacting parents and so forth. So to try to prevent the students from failing. So all students should be reviewed at least once per grading period for any student in the SAT process. So if we see a student that's struggling, you know, maybe, you know, that grading period, it might be a student that we need to start looking at and put in the SAT process. You know, typically we see that when kids change, if it's, you know, a 5th grader going to 6th grade or 8th grade going to 9th grade. Those are typical students that we really have to kind of keep an eye out for. The rights of the teacher when it comes to informing parents about local advocates, and this is a new thing that they had been talking about. You know, who can come to the IEP meeting. Basically, we're looking at protection methods in place for teachers who advocate for students. Then all teachers' protection rights are set forth under that code. So, you know, even if they reach out and, you know, we can't reprimand them or get on to them. What's new that we've not had before with this House bill is now that in every IEP meeting, a representative of the school will now have to explain to the guardian of the child the process for identifying that child, the parents or the guardian's due process rights. And we have a copy of those that we give, and I'll get you guys that information to let them know what the rights and so forth are. Teacher protections and procedural rights are set forth under 1821. And then we have to kind of disclose to them if they have any questions about local advocacy groups, such as Disability Rights of West Virginia, Legal Aid, you know, West Virginia Family Engagement Center. So these are things that are new that we've not had to do before, but they're there to share it with folks. Does anybody have any questions? I know that's a lot of information that I kind of went through fairly quick for the amount that they wanted covered.
How many special ed kids do we have, Matthew, just a ballpark figure in our schools?
A little north of 800.
Yes.
In high schools and elementaries?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Is that an
That
inordinate,
includes gifted speech only as well.
is speech included in that?
Speech and gifted are both included
Okay.
in that figure.
Yes.
So how many, take speech and gifted out, and how many would we have? Do you know?
Well, it's hard to say because some of our speech kids also receive other services.
So we don't really have a good
No.
number on who's really in, how many's in the classes, how many's in speech, how many's, I wish we did have
Probably
that.
around 700, 725.
Maybe we could think about, you
Probably.
know, doing that and seeing how many are in each, you know, different category and know right off the bat, you know, what some of our problems might be.
It'll fluctuate.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we
Rapidly.
really ought to do that every year so that we know how it goes with kids. Cause it seems as though it's getting higher every year.
Yes, it is.
From the report out of the WVEIS system that would tell you that.
Yeah, we could get that off the WVEIS system for just Lincoln County.
I think so.
Let's see if we can.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, let's see if you can get that for us as board members.
I'll do that. All right, second thing we need to talk about is this new Senate Bill 199, and it took effect July the 2nd. And it's for the upcoming year, and basically it's relating to our elementary behavior intervention. Now, before when we were dealing with students that were excluded from classroom, it was just mainly our middle high school students. Now they've added this piece to it, which is elementary. And I give you a little background here. The first part of this is, you know, under West Virginia Code 18A51, basically empowers teachers to exclude students from the classroom if they are guilty of disorderly conduct, interfering with the educational process, or that there behaves in a manner that obstructs the teaching or learning process of others in the classroom. Any threats or abuse or otherwise intimidating or attempts to intimidate an employee or student, willfully disobeys an employee, uses abusive or profanity language directed at an employee. And it also classifies that we can exclude these if we suspect that the student's had an infectious disease or any student that has been exposed to an infectious disease. This process has been around for a while, about excluding kids. And basically, when we exclude a kid from the classroom, they're placed under the control or the supervision of basically a principal or a designee. They can be readmitted to the classroom or the bus only when the principal or the designee in writing advises the teacher and reports any disciplinary action that was taken. Now, this is what we've been doing up prior to July the 2nd. If a discipline action is warranted, then the principal must, in writing and, if possible, by telephone, give the notice to the parent. So typically, a kid would get in trouble, excluded from class. They'd come in, the principal would deal with the kid. We'd call home with the parent, work something out. Next day, the kid was allowed to go back to class. Okay?
Can you exclude them if they have IEP? Or is it more complicated than that?
You can exclude them, but we have to
Have the meetings and the.
we have to look at it and see is what they're doing a manifestation of their disability or not.
What about on a bus? If they carry on a bus, does the bus driver, you know, take that to the bus, you know,
Yes.
person, and then to the superintendent at the same time, and then they have a meeting with this child, the parents, and.
Bus driver.
Yeah, the bus driver will
everybody.
attend it to the
Slip to the
discipline,
principal.
yeah, to
Yeah.
the school principal.
One thing to look at it, we always look at it this way, the bus driver is the teacher of their classroom.
Right,
That
at that
bus is their
time.
classroom.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, is that a big problem, Mr. Burnett, on the buses, to have kids who act out, who really maybe aren't even special ed kids?
We've not really had any.
Not a huge problem?
We've had a couple of outbursts on the bus where students have, but if you have to look at the number of runs that we do every single day and the number of runs we
Kids
do
we
every single
transport?
evening and the
Probably
number
pretty
of kids we
isolated.
transport, it's
It's
pretty,
not bad
it's
at
pretty
all.
isolated.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
I hope
We're-
it stays that good.
Yeah. I'm not saying we're lucky, but we're, like you said earlier, we
Yeah.
were blessed about
Yes, we're
our
blessed to have
student.
that many, because we,
Yeah.
what is the amount, well, it's gotta be huge, of percentage of students that we transport every day of our total student enrollment.
85% plus.
That's exactly what I thought, have to be big. And that's not bad, you know, to
Yeah.
have that few.
So basically, as we go on here, the principal and the teacher agrees on a course of action, for the discipline. We inform the parents and they can come back. That's kind of switching now as we move into what we're looking at now, because the law before just dealt, like I said, with grades 6 through 12, and not the elementary teachers, because at this time we couldn't exclude. So now we got to look at, or if we excluding kids, are we going to have to look at alternative learning center? And that's something other down the road that we will probably have to consider looking at.
Do we have an alternative learning center right now?
Yes.
We have a huge amount of kids in it, or
No.
just a
It's
realistic
a, it's a small number, maybe 6 or 8 kids.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Students may be re-entered in the classroom for at least the remainder of the day, and the teacher, within 24 hours, had to report this. So if you excluded the kid, you put it into WEVAS, and you had a conversation with the kid, then they were allowed to go back. But now if we had 3 exclusions in a total of a month for the same behavior, then the student must receive an in or out of school suspension, or they could be placed in ALC. But now it took up to 3 in order for this to happen. So,
They have to be in trouble 3 times seriously and.
right,
and-
this is prior to,
And it
to
goes
June.
from the teacher, the classroom teacher to the principal, and then the principal makes that
Yes.
decision, and then they go to the parent and explain.
yes.
That was
Okay.
prior to the implementation
So
of
this is
law.
prior to all that. So
Yeah.
this is kind of leading up to, I think, of why they were looking to do change. Now,
Well, it's serious, you know, they have to.
yeah, so significant changes that's in Senate Bill 199 that started July the 2nd of this year. The conference that occurred after the student's second exclusion in the semester will now include not only the principal, the teacher, and if possible, the parent, but also a school counselor or social worker. See, before, we didn't involve our counselors, we didn't involve the social workers, it was just strictly the teacher, the principal.
Sometimes you would have the principal just come to the door of the classroom, pull the teacher out in the hall for a minute and say, this is what we did, and count that as a conference. You can't do that.
No, we can't do
it
that
anymore.
now.
They have to be part of that
Yes,
conference.
so following the conference, but before the teacher and the principal agrees on a course of discipline for this student, and before the student is remitted back to class, we have to consider a behavioral plan. It must be established and implemented by the school social worker, behavior specialist, board certified behavior analyst, school psychologist, or any other qualified employee with expertise in a behavioral area. So this is the new part, getting these folks involved and putting a plan into place.
Now, have they been trained on this, or they will be prior to the new school year?
They'll be trained on it
Okay.
before school year. Yeah. Now, we look at the legislature added a best placement to those principals should consider when after returning to the classroom from 2 exclusions in the same semester. Now, see, before we were allowed 3, okay, before you really had to do something other. So a student's discipline or behavior persists, placement with a licensed behavioral health therapist or agency. Boards that do not create more alternative learning centers or expand their capacity for alternative placement will now be subjected to funding. So as we look at, okay, we're getting ready to start school, we got to consider if we get kids in trouble and how quick, what we're going to do with them. So what you guys have to think about how we're going to address that.
So it's gone from 3 in a month to 2 in a semester. Did I read that right?
Yeah.
And it's we have to, if we don't come up with an alternative placement center for these students, then if we have the funding, we have to look to an outside agency to come in and help correct their behavior.
Yes.
We could do an ALC, but we don't have one for elementary. Our ALC is 6 through 12. That's what the grants.
Is it here at the board office?
No, it's it's on the campus of Hamlin PKA.
Okay.
And then, or, you
It's
could
the old
do
annex building.
homebound,
Okay.
or you could do virtual learning. Because,
It's
So-
something we're gonna have to look at in the
Yeah.
coming months.
Yeah, I'm afraid we
Yes.
are.
That's why I'm
Sorry.
here talking to you now.
He doesn't seem to
Give
be,
me-
the
give
world
me
doesn't
a
seem to be
heads up.
getting better, does it?
No, no. So here's our special requirements for our K-6 folks in elementary. If the teacher finds that their student's behavior is violent, intimidates staff members, creates an unsafe learning environment, or impedes other students from learning in a safe environment, the student must be referred to the school counselor, school social worker, or the school psychologist, or behavior interventionist for a functional behavior assessment. So basically, we're looking at these areas here for our K-6 folks. The school counselor, the school social worker, psychologist, or the interventionist shall conduct a functional behavior assessment. Usually those are done by our school psychologist.
The one at the county office.
Yep, in our county office. Establish a behavior plan, and we have to use evidence-based interventions. The plan is put in place for 2 weeks and followed by reevaluation of the student's behavior after 2 weeks. Now, if adequate progress is being made, then the plan continues. If not, then the principal, the teacher, or the school counselor, social worker, psychologist shall consider changing that plan. So we try it for 2 weeks. If it works, we continue. If it don't, we gotta go back and revamp it. After 2 weeks under that amendment plan, the student, staff shall not show adequate progress. The student must be placed in behavior intervention program or with a licensed behavior specialist. Health agency established by the county or made available by agreement with others. So if there's no such available healthcare agency, then the following procedures would apply. The student must be removed from the classroom and or the presence of other students immediately. Then the parents must be notified to pick up, this is new, so the parents must be notified and pick up the student by the end of the day, at which time the student shall be considered suspended. If the student rides a bus, this is the new part that goes along with this, it must be under the supervision of the principal, the vice principal, or a designee to ensure everyone's safety. So if you have a student that was put out for violent and it
Ride
occurred,
bus.
and the parents can't come and get him, you can't stick little Johnny on the bus and send him home now.
Yeah,
Little Johnny has to be accompanied by somebody from the school.
oh goodness.
Yeah, and then at that time, a suspension can continue 1 to 3 days while alternative learning accommodations are
Does
being
that
made.
mean ride to school, ride from school?
Yes.
Both
Yes.
ways? That's gonna be a toughie.
Yes,
Would an
Yeah.
aide count as a designee on the bus?
it could be, yes. Because our aides are
All trained.
all trained supervisory aides, yeah. At this point, the student may be evaluated, referred for a functional behavior assessment. Basically, our goal is to figure out why the behavior occurred, what's causing it, and being the root cause, you want to get to it, and then make appropriate adjustments and put things in place to help
How many
that.
psychologists do we have?
3.
Okay.
Yeah, the student must receive education through alternative learning, accommodations, and they must not return to school until a risk assessment is made. And that can take place with our school psychologist.
But it's based on how many referrals you get and who you can get to,
Mm-hmm.
the length of time they stay home, right?
Yeah, well, we gotta follow the guideline.
Yeah.
And make sure we get things taken care of. The student returns to school after the risk assessment is provisioned for 5 to 10 days. So if during the provision, we return the student and an incident occurs, or after a provisional period, they repeat this instance, then the student shall be subject to an expulsion. The expulsion must not continue through 2 continuous semesters. So if he gets suspended 1 semester, you would just keep him out the hole, you wouldn't do 2 semesters. Immediate virtual school may be agreed method of an alternative education. So that's something we could possibly look at for our younger kids and not the ALC placement, but.
Are we looking at homebound teachers sometimes to go to these kids who are constantly getting put out
We
of
do
school?
use home.
We
We do.
utilize that service, yes.
Yeah. Just a couple things to remember, and that's back to what you were asking earlier. When we're dealing with kids, you know, with the discipline, you know, policies that we have to remember that we do have the SAT process in place. We want to use it, utilize it. If a student has an IEP or a behavior plan, we need to make sure that we're following that. And then we have to stick to our policy 2419 with the guidelines on it. If it's a manifestation of the student disability, we got to address that, you know, differently we would, you know, dealing with another kid. Just some key points to take away from Senate Bill 199 here. Just kind of a quick reference for you. Teachers can immediately remove the students, and we got to focus because it's the elementary kids, you know, exhibiting violent behavior and intimidating behaviors towards staff, peers, or creating an unsafe learning environment. A removed student will refer to the school counselor, social worker, or behavior interventionist. Basically, we're trying to figure out what the underlying cause is. 2-week behavior plan, and it can be developed, you know, by the counselor based, and we would use data for that. Implement while the student is suspended for 1 to 3 days. Depending on the incident at that time, that would give folks time to get a behavior plan together. If the student doesn't show adequate progress in 2 weeks, the plan can be continued or changed. If no progress after 2 weeks, the student may be placed in a behavior intervention program with a licensed behavioral health agency. So those are just some quick things to take away from this. Just if you're still looking back through the whole thing, just at the end of it there, if you kind of forget a couple things. Anybody have any questions?
Have any questions you haven't already answered, but I appreciate you giving the presentation, and congratulations on getting in compliance, and thank you and thank your whole team for us. It's, I know there's a lot that goes into it that we don't see on a daily basis and maybe don't even understand ourselves, but
And families are so torn
moving in the
apart
right direction, and
nowadays.
we appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 5, I'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the June 30th board meeting.
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second it.
Thomas and Burns, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
5-0. Moves us to item 6, consent items. I'll give everyone a few minutes to look over there. There's quite a few. I was just gonna ask on C, we have a revised job description. Can you go into the revision there a little bit and explain that?
Yes, the job description in the past for that one read that it had to be an administrative person, and it had to be a person located inside of Lincoln County High School. And what we were running into was there was no one that met that criteria. So we struck that and just put preferred, so that's still, that's still available to us, and it's preferred, but if we find somebody that meets all the other qualifications but doesn't have that, we can still proceed.
A few language changes.
Just, yeah, does it make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Now that, the number E, Frank, kind of tell us a little bit about that. The contracted service agreement with Applied Behavior Learning Center.
That's up Mr. Miller's alley.
Okay. What about that, Matt?
I didn't hear you.
The, yeah, do you have a board member agenda, or have the agenda? It's,
Applied behavior.
it's, no, it's, item 6, and it's number
E.
D.
Jordan, yeah.
Okay.
We have students that have to have behavior services, and since we do not have a behavior specialist employed through our county, we have to contract in order to meet the needs of the students. So whatever services are provided, since we don't have that person, we contracted out.
Is this one person pretty much strung among all of our schools?
Yes.
You said she pretty thin on the ground to get kids getting help from her?
She is, but she does a good job.
Yeah, but we have a lot of kids who have problems anymore, you
Yes.
know, and I just wonder if, you know, we need to get maybe somebody else, you know, half-time or something that we could get them, because it seems like kids are just having a really tough time with school and home anymore. Well, all of them are, and us too, but kids need it so much, because sometimes in families, it's just not there for them.
Mhm.
So can we kind of look into that?
Sure.
Okay.
If there's no other questions, I'll ask.
Approve items 8 through 12.
Thank you, Mr. Mosteller. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Comma, second, all in favor? Aye.
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 Vote. Move us on to item 7. Mr. Barnett's asking us to put the following policies up for 30-day review. Anyone have any questions on those? I looked through those earlier. They seem pretty cut and dry.
These are where we're going through all of our policies and making updates, with the exception of the personal electronic devices, policy 5136, that's based on new legislation.
I'll ask for a motion to approve.
I will.
Make a motion, we approve the
Commas,
Policy.
motions, and I'll take Mosteller second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moves us on to item 8, allowed and authorized payment of bills.
I'll make that motion.
Burns makes the motion,
I'll second it.
comma, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moves us on to personnel. It's the blue sheet.
If I could call your attention to A1, Doris Wilson.
Doris Wilson.
And I1, Pamela Watson. Based on new personnel law, those persons are not eligible to be on the sub-list for 60 days from their retirement. So we'll
Okay.
strike those 2 items for now, and they'll appear on a later agenda.
Is that a new thing?
Yes.
I have a motion to approve personnel.
I'll make that motion.
Burns motions. I have a second.
I'll second it.
McComas. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Moves us on to item 10, superintendent update.
We've gotten some good news. I don't know if I mentioned this at the last board meeting or not, but we were successful with the School Building Authority in securing about $860,000 to install a new chiller at Lincoln County High School. We have one fairly new chiller over there. I think it was installed in, I want to say, 2012. But the other one was original to the building, and it has 3 compressors. One of which is operational, one is kind of operational. We're robbing parts from the third one to make sure the other one works, and the parts are obsolete. So I presented to the School Building Authority, and they agreed that that was a necessary expenditure. So they granted us a little over $800,000. In our matching funds will be about $125,000 in order to secure a new chiller for that building. So we're in the process now. We've put out a request for architects to submit to us for us to choose an architect to go with that project, and then we'll get the ball rolling on that. The actual chiller itself, they're about 7 to 8 months out once we order it. So we're probably looking at realistically this time next year before the actual installation takes place. Other than that, we're getting ready for a new year. We're winding up. We've been doing a lot of maintenance on buses, getting those ready to go. Waxing crew's been out, paint crew's been out, trying to spruce everything up before we get ready to get started with our kids next year. Enrollment is holding steady.
That's good news.
As to what it was. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. Really pleased about that. We do have, we're looking at a possibility. I was on a webinar today with Superintendent Blatt. There's some delay in some of our title funding, but we're talked to Mr. Lucas and Mr. Gaines, and we have other sources, and we're in good shape there. We'll be okay. Not saying we're not going to get the title funding that we're used to getting. It's just delayed. And not Title I's safe. We already have that. That's solvent. It's Titles 2 through 5, which cover things like professional development. It could cover some personnel, but we really don't employ any personnel under there. It covers like student reward trips, student competitions, things of that nature. But we do have other funding sources to make sure that those things can go on uninterrupted.
Good. The big thing's covered, isn't it?
And
That's good.
that's all I have. If you've gone by the Duval project, I assure you the gymnasium will not be pink. That is an air barrier that's placed on the building prior to the brick going on. Every time we go up there, we see a different set of walls up. So it's exciting, and I'm sure it's exciting for the community to be able to see progress being made there. You can actually see something out of the ground now. So now it's real.
Do they have kind of a date of when they're gonna-
November 16th of 26.
Okay.
That all you had?
That's all I have.
Move us on to item 11, board member comments. Anyone have anything? I'll just note that I seen on, I think it was Facebook the other day, Josh Hardesty over at the high school, doing some prep classes. I think that's a good program.
I do too.
They've presented that program at Mountain State a while back. I thought it was a good idea, and I'm glad we're taking part of it.
He had a good turnout over there. There were about 18 students in there that were doing SAT prep, and we've had a good turnout for summer school, a good turnout for credit recovery. So it's been exciting to see a lot of good things going on this summer.
It's his first course too, right?
It is.
First time.
You know, I think now that most of the parents are beginning to see how good those programs are for their kids, and it helps them to keep on going instead of totally dropping out, that it's just a good thing that we offer those, that the kids don't have to lose a year and then they really do drop out and
That's
don't come
correct.
back.
Absolutely.
Moves us on to item 12. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn until July 29th.
I'll approve it.
I'll second that
Thomas.
motion.
Burns, all in favor?
Aye.
And the time is 7:07. And we are adjourned.